Hello, everybody, and welcome to this first Tracker webinar of 2026. And we're going to be talking about the market landscape for the year ahead, looking at some of our data and discussing some of the key themes that are affecting the public procurement marketplace across the year ahead. I'm Graham Steed, the Director of Public Policy and Research at BIP Solutions, the company behind the Tracker solution. Delighted to say that I'm joined by Dawn McTaggart, our Business Development Manager for Tracker, and someone that, like me, has been around this market for an awfully long time. Over the next 45 minutes or so, we're going to give you a good look at, under the bonnet of what's been happening in the markets, what our data is telling us, where we see the opportunities emerging in 2026, and some insights on how you can position your business to make the most of these insights that we have for you. The good news is that this is definitely a sector full of opportunity and one that's becoming much more open to engaging with the market. However, to be successful, and that includes as an incumbent supplier as well as a new entrant, you need to be across what's happening. I think it's fair to say, certainly our experience from 2025 is that more than ever is happening across the public procurement landscape in the UK. It's an incredibly dynamic, diverse and fast changing place to be. So lots of stuff to find out, lots of things you need to know about. And I think, certainly the more you know, the more it drives competitive advantage in what is becoming certainly a more competitive space. I should say that if you would like a no obligation demonstration of our Tracker business intelligence platform, just drop TKR into the chat and we'll be right back to you in order to organize that. And that's it as an intro. We're going to get straight into the data because that's what we at BIP and at Tracker like best. So let's start by having a look at the market in numbers for 2025. So as I said, I mean, this is a big market, lots going on. Every year it seems that we revise upward the value of the market. So right now, we talk about this market as having a value of around £400 billion, and that's in terms of annual public procurement spend. What we do know, and we'll touch on this a little bit later, is that the actual spend and the kind of projected value of contracts in this market is significantly higher than that 400 billion. So the 400 billion is almost like a snapshot, a moment in time, but we know that the actual value is considerably higher than that. So looking at some of the big highlights from 2025, some of the things we've seen, I think it's fair to say that market activity really surged in this year. We've seen more than a 9% increase in the volume of contract notices published versus 2024. We've seen more than a 15% increase in the number of contract awards that have been published, and really positive to see the number of awards being published outstripping notices in terms of transparency. That's really good news. Perhaps surprisingly, we've seen more than 9% increase in the number of buyers in the market. And that kind of goes against maybe some popular thinking about consolidation in the market, which we definitely see in some sectors. But in terms of the number of individual buyers accessing this marketplace, that's actually gone up. And perhaps the key stat for everybody on this webinar, whether you're a new entrant or whether you're already in this marketplace, is that the number of suppliers in the public procurement market space, according to our data, has gone up by nearly 13%. So that's a really significant increase in the number of supplier numbers in this market. And I'll touch on that a little bit more in a moment. So market competitiveness, I mean, this is something that we have been tracking for a long time. To really kind of get an understanding of the market dynamics and to help our customers understand what's going on. As I say, 9.4% more buyer organisations active in 2025 than the year before, nearly a 13% increase in supplier organisations. And the ratio that we track is a supplier to buyer ratio. It was 5.2 to 1 in 2024. And it's now very nearly 5.4 to 1. So 5.4 suppliers on average chasing business from every single buyer in the marketplace. So what's driving this? Well, absolutely, one of the things that's driving it is the Procurement Act. So the Procurement Act went live, Procurement Act 2023 went live almost a year ago. It was towards the end of February 2025. And that is certainly having an impact, I think, in terms of opening up the marketplace, driving transparency and encouraging more suppliers to come into this space. We're going to talk about some other initiatives a little bit later on that are also making the public sector marketplace more attractive to new entrants. If you're an incumbent, obviously that's got to be a concern. More competition for the contracts that you have. So as much as Tracker is about helping you to grow your business with new opportunities, it's also about helping you to protect the business you already have. And as I say, more competition, more suppliers, more interest from buyers in engaging the market and proactively reaching out to new suppliers does mean more competition if you are already in this space. So yeah, the Procurement Act, definitely a key driver in bringing more suppliers in. The range of requirements that the public sector has is as diverse and far-reaching as ever, and we've seen really good growth and opportunities across all major sectors, which we'll dive into in a bit more detail shortly. So just to go into a bit more detail on the competitiveness side of things, where are we seeing that change? Well, it's quite interesting. Local governments, we've seen around about another 1,600 suppliers come into the local government space year on year. We've seen an increase in central government. We've seen health fairly static in terms of the number of suppliers, actually a slight decline. Education, number of suppliers has gone up substantially by more than 1,000. Housing has gone up again quite substantially. And even in defence, which traditionally has been an area where perhaps the supply base hasn't been as large, at least the direct supply base hasn't been as large, we've actually seen a fourfold increase in the number of suppliers that are winning business directly from the MOD in the last year. So that's quite encouraging, not least given the amount of new spend that's coming into that sector. And transport is probably the only area where the number of suppliers has actually declined quite significantly year on year. But in most other areas, we are certainly seeing many more suppliers coming into this space, so more competition for contracts. Fortunately, the size of the market is growing, so it's more suppliers, but the actual size of the pie is growing. But as I say, and I'll keep coming back to this theme because I think it's really, really important, there will be more competition for the contracts you already hold if you're in that position already. So yeah, a competitive space. So where are we seeing this growth in opportunities? What we have seen year on year is total value growth of 223%. So that's a massive increase in the value of contract awards in this market in the last year. Part of the driver of that is the actual value of the awards going up, which is obviously good news. And part of it is also driven by transparency. We are seeing more award notices than ever before in the market being published. So naturally, we have more visibility now of the actual amount of business that is being won. Central government has had a pretty huge increase in value over the past year, about 146% increase. And the health sector has probably seen the largest volume in terms of award value over the past year as well. Local government, very strong. It's always been a mainstay of public sector procurement, but we've seen local government spending up by about 7.6%. And again, quite interesting because the overall perception of the local government market at the moment is very much about budgets and squeezes on the amount they have to spend. Despite that, there are still significant rises in the value of those contracts. Central government, as I say, that's gone up in terms of volume and value of contracts, and health has been a bit of a standout over the past year. We would expect that certainly to continue into 2026 as well. Defence, again, this is a really active sector. One of the key things that we're really waiting for in defence that we think will drive the volume of contracts and drive engagement even further is the Defence Investment Plan. So this is a key document that's expected really any time now that's going to talk about in very practical terms exactly what the MOD's priorities are for the next few years. So right now, there's a lot of really good intent, and we've seen this through the Strategic Defence Review. We've seen it with the Defence investment strategy. There's a lot of talk about more spend in defence, getting to 3% of GDP, for example. What we have yet to see is how that's actually going to convert into real live contract opportunities. And it's believed that the Defence Investment Plan will be the thing that really talks to that level of detail and actually sets out the key projects. So this is something that industry is anxiously waiting for. And I think once that's been published, we will actually start to see quite a significant uptick in the number of contracts emanating from the defence sector. But overall, across all sectors, it's looking pretty buoyant. And I think if you're a supplier in this market, you should be confident about the year ahead. notwithstanding the fact that actually, as I said, again, more competition, and I think what public sector buyers are expecting now from suppliers is increasing exponentially every year. So there's an opportunity, but I think we're going to have to work harder to realise those opportunities in the year ahead. Now, I've mentioned a few times about contract awards. Again, this is something that we track very, very closely. We're interested in contract awards for a few reasons. One is that obviously it's really helpful for you as suppliers to see who's winning business and who they're winning business from and how much for. So in terms of your competitor analysis, that's a really helpful thing to have a insight into. But the other really important thing about awards is, when are these awards expiring? So as a result of seeing an expiring contract award, is there really an opportunity for that to be reissued, for that to be a recurring piece of business? So we track contract awards expiring very, very closely to really understand where those future opportunities are. What we can see is that in 2026, there are more than 40,000 contract awards set to expire. So potentially 40,000 or so new opportunities coming from existing requirements back into the market. It's not a guarantee, because some of these requirements might have been one-off requirements and the need for them is no longer there. But even if you said, 2/3 of that amount is due to come back on the market, it's a really significant amount. So as a supplier in this space, tracking expiring contract awards is incredibly important, because it helps you identify what's likely to come up and allows you to start positioning your business and building up your pipeline and your engagement around that. So where are we seeing these awards expiring? Local government. It's one of the biggest sectors by volume anyway, so naturally most of these awards are expiring in the local government sector. We're seeing just over 13,300 awards expiring in 2026 with a combined value of over £42 billion. So just think about that number for a moment, £42 billion across just over 13,300 awards that are expiring next year. So huge potential there if that's your market space. Central government, we're looking at just over 10,500 awards expiring in 2026. Combined value here is even higher, 169 billion in terms of value of expiring awards in the central government sector in 2026. Central government contracts tend to be higher value than local government contracts, so that explains really the big difference in the value. But again, if you're a supplier to central government, then that has to be of interest to you in terms of the size and the value of that market space. And then across all other sectors, we're seeing more than 16,500 awards expiring in 2026, with a value combined of around £96 billion. So huge amount of spend that's due to be unlocked again in 2026. And really, what I would urge you as a tracker subscriber, if you are one, if you're not a tracker subscriber, then this is the kind of insight you can get, is to really dive into those awards and understand what's there. I don't know, Dawn, just to kind of break away to you for a second here. How important do you think this contract awards data is, and I guess what have your customers told you about how they're using this to kind of help them build their pipelines for future?
Oh, it's absolutely hugely important, and something that we've been advocating a long time is about engaging early. That is the mantra that we speak of, and the companies that we work with that are heavily invested in public sector very much take the opinion that if they're not knowing when contracts are coming up for renewal, then they're really too late to the game. So the awarded contract values, the companies that I speak to that are quite new to public sector often take the opinion that that's maybe missed opportunity, and I always reinforce, absolutely not. Do not consider awarded values as missed opportunity. This is your pipeline of work for the future. So you can identify not just when contracts are coming up for renewal, who the incumbents are, so you can go out and aggressively target competitors that you've got a really competitive edge against, or a lot of the time it can be used for partnerships as well. But it's really about planning that landscape, that future pipeline work that makes companies more successful when they're using that data and that intelligence.
Yeah, and I guess it's just another signal, isn't it? So if you have this data and you're able to say, okay, well, I'm going to get in touch with this buyer, I see they've got these awards that are expiring. Well, maybe those awards are not exactly the awards that are going to renew next year, but it gives you a hook and an angle for a conversation, and it shows that you're engaged in the market and that you know a bit about what they're doing. So, hopefully it's an award that's going to come back to market, and you just put yourself in a really good position by engaging early. If it's not coming back, then where else can that conversation go? I guess that's the point, isn't it? It's just another reason to have that conversation, to build that dialogue and that relationship with that particular buyer.
Exactly. I mean, as much as the awards are often recurring, they do evolve. And it's important to get engaged as early as possible, because more and more, and very much in line with the new regulations that went live that you'd mentioned back in February last year, a big part of that is about engagement consultation processes. And if you're being involved in that open dialogue that's not possible during a live tender submission stage, then you're giving you the opportunity to really influence future contracts. So the contract renewals don't necessarily need to be exact mirror images. They will evolve, but they can evolve with your influence, which ultimately helps increase your win rate when you go to bidding for the work.
Yeah, and absolutely right. And I think, as you get into tracker, I mean, the figures that I've given are very high level. I've just talked about, sectors like central government, local government. What you're able to do is dive right in, see the granular detail of those awards, which sectors they're in, the values, who the individual buyers are, the contact points into those buyers as well. So, I mean, I've given a very high level view, but if you dive into tracker, you can really get quite granular in terms of where those awards are coming. And as Dawn rightly says, you're able to then move that into your pipeline. So that could be your pipeline for 2026 in terms of those recurring awards, into 2027, 28, et cetera, et cetera. So really valuable intel. And just going back to what I said earlier, this is why we're so pleased to see more award notices being published, because it's such powerful insight for you as a supplier into this market to get a view of what's happening down the track. Good news is it's not the only thing that's going to give you that insight. And I'm going to talk about something else in that area in just a moment. So lots of activity around notices and awards. Another area that we've definitely seen significant increase in over last year and certainly a couple of years preceding that is framework agreements. So frameworks are typically for larger requirements. They're typically multi-year, more often than not 3 years plus, can be quite high value. But framework agreements are a really useful way for buyers to kind of aggregate their requirements, to buy from an agreement that's been agreed, that has pre-approved suppliers, that has preset terms and conditions, et cetera, et cetera. We know that buyers are under more and more pressure at the moment. The capacity constraints that they have, the multiple agendas that they're trying to serve. So increasingly, frameworks are being seen by buyers as a more efficient and effective way of going to market. Now, up until the Procurement Act last year, frameworks were really a case of, if you weren't on the framework agreement, you were locked out until that framework expired and was then renewed. Now we have open frameworks as a result of the Procurement Act. Obviously, the majority of frameworks are still closed, just from a timing perspective, but more open frameworks are now coming onto the market. And the open frameworks allow you, or rather allow the buyer, to reset periodically and invite new suppliers in. So they're a bit more like a DPS, I guess, than the way frameworks were set up previously. So that's the good news for the future. Right now, the majority of frameworks that exist are still under the old regulations, the PCR regulations, rather than the Procurement Act regulations, unless you're in Scotland, of course. But what we have seen is these agreements really dominating the market. So our data tells us that nearly 19% of all contracts that were published in 2025 were on the basis of a framework agreement. So you might think, well, 19%, almost a fifth of all contracts, that doesn't sound so much. It still leaves 80% of contracts that are not covered by a framework. But the really interesting stat here is that those 19%, almost 20% of contracts account for more than 75% of the total value of contract award in the year. So 75% of the value coming from just under 20% of the volume. So it's quite a disproportionate relationship between volume and value. And it does say that most of the value in the market is being driven through these framework agreements. So what does this mean? It means that if you are a supplier in this market space, frameworks are incredibly important to you. It's an area that we've been investing hugely into in Tracker over the past year to ultimately build the largest database available of all framework agreements and associated contract notices. And certainly as a supplier in this space, it's something that you need to be absolutely across. I don't know, Dawn, if you'd like to jump in there from your perspective, just in terms of the importance of frameworks and how through Tracker we're helping suppliers to identify these frameworks and make sure they're not missing out.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that really feeds into our experience in the market as well, Graham, because having been in this space for over 40 years, we've know the challenges that both buyers and suppliers face, and because we work across both sides, frameworks are definitely becoming far more popular and a far easier way for authorities to procure. So having listened to our customer base, because again, another beauty of what we do with Tracker is everything is in-house. So we've got a lot of consolidation within the business, and we feed back to our product and IT teams who build the products that we utilise and our suppliers use. And frameworks were becoming more and more popular, and in our discussions with suppliers, they were becoming more and more common. So we've taken the exercise over quite a number of months. A huge amount of investment has been put into the business and making a framework specific module. So what we've actually done through our research and predominantly through our data science team is created a framework module that manually maps out over 11,000 frameworks. So rather than just giving you visibility of the framework, when it starts, when it ends, obviously very important content to have, but the companies that we were speaking to were feeding back, we're still going through huge amounts of trawling, PDFs, spreadsheets, and it's spending hours, framework managers spending hours and hours and hours every week just trying to gain this visibility. So now that we're manually mapping this, we're giving you visibility of the direct awards, of the call-offs. You can see who's procuring through those frameworks. So if you're a company that's on a framework, you can actually look at all the authorities that are actually procuring through that framework, and it might actually negate the need for them to even go down a tender exercise, because you can reach out to them and say, we're on this framework, were you aware? And then they can potentially directly award to you. What you can also do is look at all the incumbents that are on the framework with you, and that can often identify what frameworks you need to be targeting, because as you rightly say, there are a huge amount of volume of frameworks, and it equates to such a huge percentage of the public sector purse. So it's important to do that analysis in the background. You're not going to necessarily bid for every single framework, but if you can do that analysis where we support you with and identifying, right, these are the frameworks we want to be targeting, then you're investing your time and resource on far more fruitful information. So it's really doing all that time-consuming, laborious research and analysing the market and allowing you, with a very quick click of a button, information to be able to say, these are the frameworks we're going to be targeting, so your time can be spent on far more lucrative measures.
Perfect. Thank you, Dawn. And yeah, I mean, just to kind of finish off on the frameworks theme for a moment, we're seeing just shy of 7,000 existing frameworks expiring in the next 12 months. So again, just like with regular contract awards, there's not a guarantee that all these frameworks will be relet, but we're seeing almost 7,000 coming to an end in the next 12 months. Of that, nearly 2,600 frameworks in local government are expiring in 2026 with a value of around £18 billion. Nearly 1,600 frameworks expiring in central government of value of £135 billion. And across the rest of the market, 2,839 to be precise frameworks across health, education, utilities and other sectors expiring in 2026, combined value of around £27 billion. So an awful lot of frameworks are coming to an end in 2026, all of which, or many of which, could absolutely be relet. And if they are relet, if they're in England, Wales, Northern Ireland, they'll be relet under the Procurement Act 2023, which means they could be open frameworks and much more flexible in the future. So definitely something to keep track of. And of course, all of that data is sitting in the Tracker platform. So that's the frameworks that are expiring, but there's also new frameworks that we are expecting onto the market as well. And we're kind of seeing this data coming through from the new Procurement Act forms. So you've got your pipeline notices, preliminary market engagement notices and planned procurement notices, all of which is in the Tracker system. So on the back of all of those kind of market indicators, those kind of signals of what's likely to be coming down the track, we can see right now that there's an estimated 2,234 new frameworks coming onto the market in 2026, with a quite mind-blowing combined value of £1.7 trillion. Now, I know that sounds like a bit of an Austin Powers, Dr. Evil kind of number, but it's real. That is the combined value. Obviously, framework agreements go over a number of years, 3 years, 5 years, sometimes even longer than that. So you look at the combined value, it can be absolutely massive. But yes, we are expecting many more new frameworks coming onto the market in 2026, all of which, as Dawn rightly said, will be in the tracker platform for you to go and see and engage with. So, as is tradition on these webinars, I've overrun spectacularly talking about the data just because there's so many interesting things to talk about. We're going to move into a bit more of a discussion in a moment about some of the other themes. I think just one more theme to talk about, and I did mention other kind of indicators of business that are coming for next year. One of the really positive things that we've seen with the Procurement Act 2023 has been the creation of UK1 pipeline notices. So these are notices that are going to be published every April and May. They only apply to a certain threshold of contract, a certain value of contract, and it's only certain organisations that need to publish them. All of the detail can be found on the tracker site. But what we are seeing is that already almost 6,200 UK1 pipeline notices have been published with again, an absolutely huge value associated with that. So these pipeline notices are a really valuable source of intel for you as a supplier to give you an idea of what these authorities are planning to procure over the course of 2026 and beyond. The publication of the notice is a pretty firm indicator that that will be a requirement. And once that pipeline notice has been published, it then needs to be followed up with the other typical notices that you see, like the preliminary market engagement notice, and then obviously the tender notice and so on. So look out for these pipeline notices. They're called UK1. The other really important notice to look out for that supports early engagement is the UK2. And then you've got your UK4 tender notices, which are really when the procurement has gone to market. We would say if you're engaging at the point of the UK4 tender notice, that's really too late. You need to be tracking these things at UK2 level and UK1 level. Obviously, all of that refers to the Procurement Act legislation. If you're in Scotland, you're still under PCR 2015, which is slightly, quite a different piece of legislation in terms of how procurement works. But yes, just to summarize all of that, really busy 2025. 2026 is looking really positive in terms of the activity we can already see, that we're already predicting through the pipelines, through the frameworks, through the awards, let alone anything else new that comes onto the market as we make our way through the year. Okay, well, look, hopefully that's given you a good picture of the market from a data perspective. But this market is, as critical as the data is, this market is much more than just about the data. It's also about what's happening, what the themes, what the trends, what the signals that we're seeing in the market. So over the remainder of this webinar, we're just going to talk through some of these themes and kind of get some dialogue around what we think is happening. So, Dawn, I've mentioned the Procurement Act a couple of times now. We're almost coming up to the first anniversary of it, which is quite hard to believe. What are you hearing from suppliers? What are they saying about the Act? What's their awareness of the Act? How are they coping with the new notices? Just what's the experience been so far?
Yeah, I think it really is quite a mixed picture, Graham. I mean, I think one of the biggest parts is we have had the Act now in place for nearly a year. 24th of February last year it went live. I think there was a lot of sort of hesitation in the market for a long time by suppliers because, I mean, it's Procurement Act 23 that went live in 25. That really sort of says it all. That it was waiting for the new Act to go live. It now is live. It's been live for almost a year. A lot of companies that I'm speaking to have certainly embraced it, certainly embracing the transparency aspects of it, because the more transparent the market is, the easier it is for companies to track the market and horizon scanning. A lot of companies, though, are still adjusting to it and they're still learning. That's something that we can certainly support with. We've actually added quite a lot of educational pieces into the tracker solution as part of a learning zone, because it is quite a seismic change for both buyers and suppliers. So it's really important to make sure that you're educating your bid teams and indeed the wider groups as to the importance of everything that's involved in the new regulations. But as you touched upon, UK1 and UK2 pipeline notices, they're an absolute game changer. Yeah. I mean, as we've mentioned when we were speaking about the awards, that is something we've been advocating, the importance of engaging early. So having these pipeline notices in place now really makes it so much easier for our customers to actually forward plan. So they're now, we're always saying, look at the market, look at who you're wanting to be targeting. Now, by having those pipeline notices in place, our customers can actually say, well, these are authorities that we actually really want to be engaging with, and we know that they're planning a procurement route over the next 12 months. So it gives them the opportunity to start building those relationships. So I would say of all of the changes that the Procurement Act has resulted in the market, the pipeline notices are, for me, the most powerful part from a supplier's perspective. But
yeah,
obviously
absolutely.
the sorry.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
Completely agreeing. Completely agreeing. I think the key thing has been it's been transparency, and I guess what we had under the PCR was quite a binary set of notices. You've got your PIN, your notice, your award, addendums. What we're seeing now with the Procurement Act is the noticing regime is talking to a commercial life cycle rather than the procurement life cycle. Mm. So I think, for me as a supplier, what you should be doing is looking at all these different notice types and saying, okay, what's that telling me about where this buyer is in their cycle? Because there's now much more step-by-step granular detail of every stage in that process. And it's not just about the go-to-market anymore. It's about what happens before they go to market with a tender notice, as you say, the pipelines, preliminary market engagement type notices. And then it's even about once they've gone to market, the contract details notice before the award notice, and then obviously the notices that are now coming out that talk more to supplier performance and contract performance. So I think what we've now got is a suite of notices that really gives you a powerful insight into where buyers are at, what they're thinking, what they're planning, and also, insights into things now like how suppliers are performing, which we've not really seen before. And it's still early days, so I don't think there's too much of that out there yet. But I think as we work our way through 2026, we will see more notices that talk to supplier performance. And obviously, as a supplier, that gives you an insight into how your competitors are performing and therefore a potential opportunity. So yeah, I mean, I think absolutely agree with what you're saying on the pipeline notices. I think they have been key, but I think we've now got this expanded suite of notices that give you much more insight, and of course all of those are in the tracker solution, aren't they?
Absolutely, and that's the thing, we have adapted Tracker to take into account all of the new notices. So rather than just having everything together, you can very easily filter where are your UK1s, where are your UK2s, your pipeline, your actual tender notices, the awarded contracts. Everything is easy to gain the insight into what you want. So the transparency is certainly helping the information flowing through, but we've adapted and evolved Tracker to match the changing needs of the procurement world, which just shows that we're always evolving the system to cater for new changes. But it's all positive, and certainly the companies that I'm speaking to, the more they get their head around the new regulations and the change, because it has been a bit of a change of the way people are working. I mean, the companies that I speak to that are very heavily invested have been using this model for a long time, which is why they're gaining the success that they have. But even smaller businesses who are very new to public sector are changing the way they think about procurement now, and it's becoming a much more sort of longer term strategy, but looking at when to start that engagement and all of the new regulations and how we've adapted Tracker to be able to identify that at the right time is certainly helping support that medium to longer term pipeline growth as well.
Yeah, and I guess maybe in a way, just based on what you're saying there, this is a bit of a leveling up. So, businesses that have been more established in this market may have been through informal means getting more of those kind of insights into the buyer behaviors, but these new notices are kind of making it much more visible to everybody, which is good news if you're new to the market. But again, if you're an incumbent, means you're now going to have to work harder on that engagement, because other businesses have now been able to close the gap.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it's certainly far more competitive than I've ever seen. And I've been with this business 14 years, so I've seen a very changing landscape over the years. But competition is key, and certainly incumbents can't just assume that they're going to get re-awarded, because there is a lot of disruption in the market now, but it's all for the good. And there's a lot of companies I'm speaking to are brand new to public sector, and they're looking at this as a new route to market. I mean, recently, a few examples, I'm speaking to companies who have been very heavily invested in oil and gas, and that industry is obviously very turbulent at the moment. So they're looking at what other routes can I take to ensure that our business continues to grow, and public sector is an obvious choice for all industries. I mean, we work with companies of every size and every level of experience, and indeed every sort of industry sector, because there's opportunity for everyone, which is great. So competition is there, but I don't think that's a bad thing at all.
Not at all, not at all. And the good news, if you're a procurement geek like us, is that the Procurement Act's not over, because there was a consultation launched last autumn, and a number of recommendations sit in that consultation around payment regimes, social value, which is a whole other webinar in its own right, and a number of other kind of changes to really align procurement with the government's missions and priorities. So if you thought the Procurement Act was done, it's not done. Some of these new measures are going to be coming out into legislation in 2026. Obviously, we'll be keeping you fully informed in terms of what that means for you. But yeah, there's more to come from the Act. You said the word disruption, Dawn. I just want to kind of touch on this for a second. The public sector marketplace is certainly undergoing a degree of transformation at the moment. If you look in some of the main areas, local government, we've got local government reorganisation. That's a huge change. A number of organisations being merged. I mean, there's one example in the south of England where 13 separate councils are merging into one. So if you're a supplier in that area, clearly that could have a potential impact for you, positive or negative. So LGR is a big thing for 2026. One of the positives from LGR is that it may well be bringing some new people into procurement as well as new organisations. It may be causing some contracts to be brought forward. So potentially some upside as a result of LGR. But one good example, I think, of change in the landscape. Obviously, in the NHS, we know there's a lot of change in the NHS through the reform project. Again, quite a changing face of public procurement in that area, with the move back to the Department of Health and Social Care for procurement responsibility. So again, something that suppliers need to be aware of in terms of who they're going to be speaking to about their procurement and who's involved in that supply chain. And defence, again, we touched on this a bit earlier on. More money coming into defence, but at the same time, the MOD is really quite markedly changing the way it goes to market. So there's a strong degree of reform in its procurement processes, trying to get things specified and delivered much faster. So procurement at pace. So again, something that certainly, if you're a supplier in those kind of sectors, you need to be aware of. So a good deal of change that we're expecting across the market in the coming year, most of which the seeds have already been sown for, but we're going to see more of it. And I guess the other big disruptor, and just want to spend a minute or two on this, Dawn, is AI. So we're seeing AI is everywhere at the moment. You can't have a conversation without mentioning AI. What's your take on that? And again, what are you hearing from the people that you're engaging with about their approach in this area?
No, absolutely. I mean, AI is definitely there in every aspect of procurement now, in every aspect of most companies, the way they work themselves, and certainly the way we work as a business as well. We've embraced AI both in an individual perspective and also just as a work company-wide. But certainly from my discussions with suppliers are using AI for a whole variety of different things, from bid writing to identifying opportunity to analysing competitors. I think that you need to take on a bit of a smart approach to this, because what you don't want to do is replace the human touch. And I think that there is a bit of a risk that, you know, AI generated bids can be spotted by buying authorities. And it's important that you don't just completely use the AI and solely that. But certainly it's certainly helping to develop relationships and certainly helping to develop strategy as well. We've certainly taken that on board within Tracker, and the data that we've got. I mean, we've always been a very data-rich environment, and Tracker is all about the data. What we're doing now is using AI to really give more insightful analysis of that data, because raw data is just that. There is so much information within Tracker. It's so important that we are able to really give visibility to our customers that's most relevant to them. So we're using AI in the background through our data science team to really ensure that the content that we're showcasing is relevant, that it's the right kind of fit for businesses, and that they can really analyse the information as easily, saving a huge amount of time. We've actually just recently integrated into the system a new role of ARIA, which is our AI model that's embedded into the platform. It's launched this month, it launched last month, sorry, as what we've identified as contract summary. Now, what we're doing with this is, again, trying to save time and resource. So many companies that we're speaking to, time and resource is some of the biggest challenges. Companies just do not have the amount of time and resource that they need. Nobody has enough time in their day, myself included. So what we're doing is we've launched a contract summary, which is powered by the ARIA intelligence. And what that does is delivering in seconds a summarised account of what a contract looks like. So rather than bid managers or sales managers or marketing teams or whoever may be involved in the tendering, because that's one thing that I'm always aware of. The bid managers are not the only people involved in the bid process by any stretch. So I speak to salespeople, to marketing people, bid people, senior executive level decision makers. What the ARIA is allowing them to do through the contract summary is, instead of reading through 5, 10, 15 pages of content to then identify this isn't actually the right fit for our business, it can be very quickly summarised through the AI, and that allows them then to identify, right, as part of a more robust bid no bid process, yes, this is something definitely worth further review, or actually this isn't the right fit for us. And it's saving so much time and resource, and it's really helping people focus and identify on the information that's going to be most fruitful to them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. We're also using AI to generate the descriptions for frameworks as well. So the descriptions can be quite unique and focused on the opportunity overview. We're just about to launch a new part of the ARIA, which will be going live over the next few weeks. It's a constantly evolving piece. It's very agile platform Tracker, so we don't stand still. And what that's doing is we'll use AI to learn from our customers, utilising previous bids, looking at the business as a whole, learning from our customers all the time, and then identifying, right, this is the kind of contract we recommend you focus your energy on. Again, obviously, it takes that personal touch to identify, yes, is this the right fit? But it really helps support from a bid management perspective what frameworks or what contracts they want to be involved in. So it's definitely a huge part of what we do now. And it's integrated really nicely into Tracker. So it's not just about giving raw data, it's about giving analysed and educated data.
Yeah, perfect. And I think, certainly my view on it is, it's not something you can ignore. It's about how you use it. And certainly I think there's a huge amount of value in using AI to help do research, to help summarize things, to help craft content. Just make sure that in your bid responses, it's authentic and that you can validate the things that you're talking about. So don't just rely on AI to do the bid for you. Use AI appropriately to kind of make it more efficient, but always make sure that you're answering those questions, that you've got your credible, authentic story and narrative in that bid response, because buyers will see it. And we've heard feedback from buyers where they said, well, look, we've had literally identical bid responses from a number of suppliers because they've just run it through AI. And I think buyers are using AI, so increasingly buyers are going to be using AI to evaluate, because more tenders are going to be coming in because there's more suppliers in the market. So it's not going away. I think it's just as ever, it's just about how you use it and kind of making sure that you're doing it appropriately and telling your story, and really making it relevant to who you are as a business. If this AI of this webinar was being run by AI, it'd be much more efficient, and we'd have time to talk about the many other subjects that we've got on our list for today. But we are running short on time. I guess there's just one more thing I want to cover, and that's about SME engagement. and also about market engagement. So I think a really positive thing for this year that we're seeing is that government is talking even more so about the involvement of business in public procurement. SMEs is kind of bandied about as being the terminology. The reality is 99% of businesses in the UK are SMEs, so it's pretty much everybody. But there's definitely a driver from government to try and encourage more businesses into this space, and that includes small business, micro business, and VCSEs as well. So as we've been talking about consistently, that is competition, but it's also a partnering opportunity as well. So if you are a larger business and you're thinking about how do you, for example, address social value in your bids, which again is a whole different subject, thinking about how you partner with micro businesses and VCSEs to deliver the requirements for your buyer or the social value aspects could be a really compelling way to go. So this is something that I think, certainly the larger businesses in the supply chain need to be thinking more about. It could be good for you, but it certainly helps boost your chances since it helps to address part of the buyer's agenda around social value. Government itself is doing much more. So in 2026, in April, we're going to see the launch of the Government Commercial Agency, which is a merger of Cabinet Office's procurement and commercial teams and the Crown Commercial Service, which is the largest single buying organisation in the UK. So that's happening with effect from April, and should see more alignment and better management and centralised procurement happening out of that body. We also have the launch of the Defence Office for Small Business Growth on the 1st of April this year now as well. And again, this is about trying to ensure that more defence contracts are finding their way directly into the SME community rather than going via the prime contractors. So a really important initiative, one of many that the MOD has in 2026 to really try and engage with the broader supply chain. And there's a host of other national and regional initiatives going on in 2026 as well. So it really does feel like government is serious about engaging business in public procurement and using public procurement to drive its agenda. We've spoken about market engagement. It's a very digital world that we live in now. But one of the good things that exists in this market is events. So pleased to say that our Procurement England event is returning next year. It's going to be on the 18th of June at the Exhibition Centre in Liverpool. It's a fantastic opportunity for suppliers in this market on a couple of fronts, either to exhibit and to kind of raise your profile with a really large kind of target-rich audience in terms of dedicated buyers from across the procurement community in the UK. But even if you're not exhibiting, to attend as a delegate and really to hear directly from leading stakeholders across the market about what's happening, about some of the themes we've spoken about today: social value, sustainability, AI, different methods of procurement, early engagement. It's a really valuable opportunity. So well worth taking a day out, going up to Liverpool or down to Liverpool, depending on where you are, and spending that time to hear directly from the people that are shaping this market. So there should be information on the screen at the moment about how to register. So I really would urge you to jump on and get your place booked for Procurement England on the 18th of June. So we have covered an awful lot of ground, I think, in the last 45 minutes or so. We have left 3 or 4 subjects on the table, which we will come back to in our next webinar. But hopefully this has given you, a little bit of an insight from a data perspective in terms of what's happening in 2026, but also has touched on, a number of themes that will help you protect, develop, and grow your business with the public sector in the year ahead. Dawn, is there anything you would like to add to summarise before we finish up?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot more that we could have spoken about. I mean, you mentioned social value, and we're finding every day I speak about social value, sustainability, the way contracts are being awarded is changing. So much changing landscape. We can't cover everything. As Graham said, if AI were controlling it and not the two of us, we might have covered more. But no, it's a hugely exciting time for public sector. It's a hugely lucrative market, and it's something that we're really passionate about at BIP. We want to help support businesses, and again, I'm speaking to more and more companies that are brand new to public sector, companies that are looking to really extend that side of the business because they recognise the value that's attached. So definitely feel that we can support no matter what industry sector you're in, no matter what size of your business. So if you would like to see how Tracker can help the business, we'd love to show you. We're offering everyone in today's webinar a personalised demonstration. It is very unique and individual. We will not do sort of specific generic industry specific. We want to get to know your business, so it would be very tailored. So if anyone would like to know more information, book directly using the link in the chat or drop me an email, and certainly we'd be happy to either myself or one of my colleagues give you a call. It is all about making the right fit for you, so it's a very scalable modular platform, and definitely, as Graham said, book your place into ProcureX England. The events are fantastic opportunities to get face to face. We talk so much about engagement and building those relationships, but there's nothing beats getting face to face with buyers and indeed suppliers. A lot of companies we work with engage with supply chain at these events as well. They're also very good for educational pieces. So big learning curve for a lot of companies about the new Procurement Act, as we've discussed. There's a lot of advice on offer on the days as well. So whether we can help you with Tracker or any of our events, please do get in touch and we'll be happy to support.
Yeah, thank you, Dawn. And yeah, just to finish from me, echo everything Dawn's just said. I think the market is becoming more competitive, but the amount of opportunity in the market is also growing. So that's good news. I think it's, personally, it's all about investment. And I think those suppliers that, like you, that have come along to this webinar today to find out more, those that engage with buyers, those that read up about what's happening, those that get under the skin of the Procurement Act in particular and really understand how that's changed in the face of public procurement, and those that really get to understand the needs and challenges of buyers and the agenda that they're trying to address. Those are the businesses that I think will be more successful in the long term. And obviously, Tracker is there to support you. Hopefully, today has been useful. There's a lot to cover. I think we'll be doing another one of these webinars fairly soon to touch on some of the subjects that we didn't cover. But yeah, hopefully it's been useful, and we both wish you well in your endeavours in 2026, and we look forward to seeing you on another webinar very, very soon. So thank you.
Hey guys, thank you.